Great. And we'll now move on to our final round of the day. I'll just share my screen for a second. Here we go. Oh, wrong screen share. Hold on, I'm gonna go to the presentation. I can do this. Get the right one. Where's my presentation? There we go. I'll get there. There we are, share. All right. So thanks everyone who's been in attendance so far. We are on to the last parts of the day on food security. We have Brunhel Vambi from Laval University, sustainable intensification of the yam agroforestry systems in the DR Congo. Your actual official title is of course much longer and you will be able to expand on it in your session, but I give it a little bit of a summary here. And then after that, we will hear from Ginny Lane from the University of Idaho, climate change pushing Guatemalan families into food insecurity, followed by our closing session. So once again, these two sessions are 15 minutes with a 5-minute question time period. I will hold up a little 1-minute warning sign when you have reached about 14 minutes. So with that, I'm very happy, Brunhel, to have you take over the floor and share your presentation.
Thank you for the floor. We are pleased today to present the partial result of our studies entitled the sustainable intensification of yam agroforestry systems as an adaptation strategy to climate change for the improvement of food security around the Luki and Ibi Village in DR Congo. We have 5 points as the presentation structure. The DRC is the second largest French-speaking country in Africa. The DRC is located in Central Africa. Its forest represents 62% of the Congo Basin forest. The DRC also a good potential to be the world's 7th largest agricultural power in terms of the water resources, the arable land, and also in order of livestock. Moreover, it should be remembered that this country is facing to a differentiated deforestation. The African Development Bank revealed that 81% of emissions come from the sector of land use and land cover. According to the same report, Congolese population are exposed to vulnerability to climate change, related to climate change. So we can see in the tab 1 the indicators that show our population are exposed. At the same time, what I want to add is the fact that the prediction of annual precipitation and the temperature for the year 2100 show how the climate of tomorrow will look. But overall, rainfall quantity are increasing and decreasing in places. Temperature on the other end are also increasing. Food insecurity and reduced capacity for women's empowerment are a result of several factors in the national and the local context. But climate change adds to an already complex system causes that condemn household in food insecurity. So our question is, we think that a yam can be a crop with a great potential for food security and increased household income. The map shows the distribution and the production of the yam around the world. Our main question is, could yam-based agroforestry systems not effectively contribute to improving the food security and financial condition of households around the Luki Biosphere Reserve in Mayombe and Ibi Village on the Plateau de Bateke? So mainly we want to contribute to the improvement of household food security through the sustainable intensification of yam production practices and through the greater control by women of household financial resources. We'll mainly evaluate present today the evaluation of the productivity and sustainability of yam-based agroforestry system in the pre-forest fallows and improved fallows. The study area are Mayombe at Congo Central and Ibi at Plateau de Bateke. We have on the left our different sites where we have put our design, and on the right also Ibi Village where we have put also our design. The stream one of our research, evaluating the productivity and the sustainability of yam-based agroforestry system in pre-forest fallows and improved fallows. As background, we must know that the slash and burn agriculture is commonly used nationwide and across tropical regions as subsistence farming for smaller farmers. We know that practice is destructive for forests, for biodiversity, and is a good potential source of greenhouse, and the expose tropical soil to the decline of fertility, and also for the productivity. So we have set up a randomized block as a design, but we present here just a part of our factual structure of our experiment. This is the photo of the design at the scale of the toposeconds. We have many variables of interest, but we will present today the result concerning the fresh mass and dry mass. We have conducted univariate analysis, but we also add multivariate analysis. Those are information about the model, because we did the transformation log. We have here the class level information. So we have 7 classes, such sites, villages, fellows, toposequences, agricultural care, species, and blocks. We have also done the adjustment test. After the transformation works, we get this figure after our transformation that proved that our postulates were verified. So at the first slide, what I want to share with you as the descriptive statistic is, when we look at this table compared to the fresh mass, comparing the fresh mass means of 2 species. What attracts us are the deviation which show there is a good variability around the means. So it's the reason that allow us to do the log transformation in order to have good, in order to respect the population. So what we can also mention is the fact that we have the highest means were not, the higher means were not for the Dioscorea alata that I have colored in green. The paraboling was done at 105 degrees Celsius until constant weight. It can be seen that the deviation structure remained practically in the tab 11. So it's kind of repeating that descriptive statistic is twice is become as we did the same thing. because there is a strong correlation between the fresh mass and the dry mass. And we conduct also the ANOVA, the analysis of variance of fresh mass. What we have to keep here is the fact that the only factor that had a significant effect was the species. That suggests that for yam production, the use of slash and burn does not significantly improve yam productivity in traditional or in improved agroforestry systems. Also, with the least square means and with the difference in least square means, we can notice that we can understand that Dioscorea alata used for the experiment is ecologically adapted in that region, as it can be considered as a native of the region. Dioscorea cayensis came from the north of DRC, while the experiment was conducted in the south. So we can say that Dioscorea alata performed well than Dioscorea cayensis. So, pending the revelation of other analyses, particularly those related to soil samples collected in 2 phases on 12 experimental design, and pending the result of nutritional analyses that are also planned, not finding the added value of slash and burn practice is an important finding for the promotion of more sustainable agriculture practices. This could therefore be a starting point for efforts to intensify yam cultivation under the agroforestry. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thanks, Brunhel. You were in good time for your presentation. If anyone has any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. At the moment, I will start off with the questions. So I think the first one that popped into my mind, maybe you can just talk about this a little bit more. So you were essentially looking at 2 yam species, correct?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I saw that the D. alata one was like much better than the other one, as you noted. But I wasn't quite clear if they were equally grown in the test areas, or if they was already dominated by one over the other.
What I can say that, if you want, I prefer to answer a question in French if you want. I don't know if someone can translate.
Sure. I think, Stephanie, do you want to try and translate?
Yeah.
I can certainly try. It might be rough, but yeah. I can certainly try.
Okay. Yeah. Ouais. Donc, la question était de comprendre si pour les 2 espèces Dioscorea alata comparé à Dioscorea cayensis, si vous voulez savoir par contre.
So perhaps I cannot.
Maybe too, yeah.
Désolé. Bon,
désolé.
Please, you can just repeat your question. I want to know, your question was that you want to know if the 2 species were different.
Yeah, maybe you can just talk about that more.
Yeah, the difference I can say is the fact that we took the Dioscorea cayensis from the north part of the Congo, and Dioscorea cayensis is not more cultivated at the region where we are conducting studies in the Mayombe, but Dioscorea alata is what people used to cultivate at the Mayombe. So, according to the ecological point, I can say those 2 species are different, but those 2 species are also different about certainly what they can bring as nutritional nutrients also.
Great, thank you. And then just a second question I had. I noticed in one of the tables that you had, there was one location that seemed to have very high yields compared to the other locations. Was that correct?
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know exactly what you mean.
Maybe you could go to, can we look at your tables for a second? Yeah, keep going. Oh yeah, go back one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this table here, did I
Yes.
understand it correctly that there is the one, the highlighted green, those had very high yields. Is that correct?
The yeah, the fresh mass of Dioscorea alata.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what the step try to show to us. Yeah, yeah, but we have confirmed this with when we done the least square, when we done the least square mean, that was really the square alata that performed well than the square penensis. But because with the ANOVA, we not just we have understood that just species have effects than other factors that we have control.
Okay, great. Okay. And I think so there's no questions in the chat box, so I think we'll leave it there. And thank you so much, Brunhel, for your presentation. It was really great, and it's really interesting to see the work that's being done in the Congo, looking at yam as a way to tackle, you know, undernourishment and food security.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was my first time to present in English.
Oh, well, congratulations. That's a real achievement. Good job. Wonderful. All right. So our next speaker is Ginny. Ginny Lane. Hi, Ginny. Good to see you. We're looking forward to your talk in Guatemala. And so the floor is yours. I will time you and give you your 1-minute warning sign when we get to that point.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'll just get my screen shared here. Okay, so the title of my talk is Climate Change, Pushing Guatemalan Families into Food Security. So I'll start off with giving you a bit of a context about the oversight of Guatemala and get into the study that we did around the rural area in Momostenango. So just to give you a bit of context, you can see that these areas in red here are quite vulnerable to climate change over the long term. Like this is 2000 to 2019. And currently, Guatemala is considered the country in the 67th place as most vulnerable. But over the long term, it's been quite vulnerable. As you can see, it's the one country here in the red in Central America. And one of the consequences of being so vulnerable likely is associated with having a high rate of stunting. So Guatemala is right here in the dark blue. And you can see that the stunting rate among children under 5 years of age is around 42.8%. That's over the entire country. And you can see that no other country around it has similar types of issues. So likely associated with the vulnerability to climate change, it's reaching into having a chronic effect on the nutrition of children. So to further situate where we are in Guatemala, so this is a map showing the levels of chronic malnutrition among young children. And these red areas here are the northern highlands, where typically there's a high rate of chronic undernutrition for children. And Totonacapan is this area right here, this little area where you can see that the rate is about 70% of children under 5 having chronic malnutrition. So just showing you the location specifically of Totonicapán, this red area right here. And Totonicapán is characterized by having a very high indigenous population, about 97%. About 72% are classified as poor. All of the 8 municipalities are classified as food insecure. And the specific chronic rate of undernutrition among children under 5 is 75%. So that means there's really the large majority of children are quite undernourished chronically. This is just a more recent slide that shows the rate of chronic food insecurity, generally meaning that the percentage of children under 5 who are stunted. So these dark areas here, which are fairly similar to the map I showed you before, that traditionally chronic food insecurity occurs in this area, but you can see it's spreading over here to this other area here too. And then more specifically around the current rate of food insecurity, very, very recent this map is. So we're in area number 21 here, Totonicapán. And the bar for Totonicapán is down here. And you can see that only 20% of the people are listed as having actual food security. The 54% are moderately food insecure, and the 26 are highly food insecure. So this is a seasonal kind of outlook in Totonicapán. So it's Totonicapán specific, meaning that other areas of the country have different seasonal predictions. And so you don't need to really read everything here. I just want to point out a few things. So this first row here is to do with the corn production. It's from January to December. And this black bar here is when the harvest happens. So you can see that other areas in the country, they're able to plant 2 seasons of crops, but not in Totonicapán. It's kind of a cold area. And so there's only this one harvest here. And in the beans, there's this one harvest here again. And then related to vegetables, these lines here. So this first line is when they can harvest vegetables when they don't have irrigation. These other lines are when they have irrigation. And not everybody has irrigation. In fact, most don't. So they're pretty limited around that as well. And then looking at sources of income here, you can see that migration to work at other sites like coffee plantations or sugar plantations is limited due to the first part of the year here and the last part of the year here. So there's some opportunities for other work, but not always. And that remittances here, they form a pretty stable source of income for a lot of families, meaning that sometimes migration to the US or to Guatemala City is pretty important to be able to have that source of income. And then the period of scarcity right here. So this bar here is when there's not a lot of food. And so this is right before the crop and the bean harvest, meaning that a lot of people have been used up all their food resources and they're kind of running out of food. So that just provides you with an overview of what the situation that most people are living in. This is just shows you our research team. So working with some local people on data collection. This is our member of our primary community partner, Red Misar, and a research assistant. So the overall objective of the project is to characterize food insecurity and coping mechanisms among the families who live in rural areas of Totonicapán, Guatemala, and it occurred in 2018. So the first step in the project was doing some key informant interviews with some community leaders. And so we had about 6 key informants who participated in interviews. And a semi-structured Spanish interview guide was used to collect this qualitative data from them about the community food security and the impact of climate change. And so the guide generally had questions about crops commonly cultivated, current agricultural challenges, food security, and perspectives on how food security could be improved. So some of the key themes that emerged from these key informant interviews were around subsistence agriculture, meaning that many families have small plots of land where they grow corn and beans as their primary source of food for their families, as well as other things, like some people have fruit trees, some people have vegetables, some people have egg-laying hens. Commercial production was also very common in the area, and that's how a lot of people generated income, by selling their vegetables and fruit at the local market. Some did a few other things like having bees chickens, pigs, rabbits, sheep. Cows were not very common at all. Some of the challenges that emerged as a primary theme were around climate, capital, and market challenges. So they are located on the edge of the dry corridor, which is the area that traditionally doesn't get enough rain. There's been a lot of recent drought and hail resulting in crop failures. In fact, they can't even grow some crops anymore, such as green beans, which were previously quite profitable. They struggle with having insufficient resources like fertilizer, water, and protective greenhouses to protect their crops. That's due to lack of resources, not having the credit to be able to buy those things. They compete in an area where there's some cheap Mexican imports because they're right below Mexico. So around eggs and tomatoes, that's a problem for them. And even some happen to mention that poor education they consider to be the root of malnutrition. And then they identified some sustainable opportunities that they would like to be involved in. So they have interest in diversifying their income sources. They, in fact, have already engaged in some sustainable tourism business. And so the individuals that are doing that are hoping to generate sustainable employment as well as protecting their forests and natural environment in that area. They indicated that there is some interest in raising turkeys and eggs because there's a thought that they can sell turkeys, around Christmas time when people want to buy that type of thing, and they can sell eggs year round. So the selling turkeys around Christmas time is important because kids return for the beginning of the school year in January. And so having that extra income around that time is very helpful for those families. And there's also interest in trainings on craft production, cultivation of citrus fruits, and natural medicine. So that kind of provided an overview of the themes that the community leaders identified. And then we got into the interviews with families. So this is a photo of one of the neighborhood groups that participated in the interviews. So family interviews took place with 55 families. And there was a questionnaire that involved demographics, employment, agricultural practices, food purchase habits, food security, and coping mechanisms. So families were interviewed using a modified guide of a questionnaire that is used in Guatemala in Spanish. And so the questions, I think I described them pretty well, but they also got into preferred food security interventions. So I'll provide an overview of some of the interesting results. So you can see that family food insecurity was very high in this area. In fact, 85%. And in fact, the way that the questionnaire is scored, it can be scored differently. Like if only one positive result of saying, I'm worried about not having enough food, if I score those people as food insecure, then that would be 100%. There's different ways of scoring the questionnaire. So the only significant difference is that the reason for leaving or not attending school during youth. So mothers responded to why they didn't attend school when they were young or why they had to leave early. And the reason that they stated was the only thing that was significantly related to being food insecure. So food insecure mothers left school due to economic limitations when they were young or needing to work, about 65%. Whereas the families who were judged as food secure, the mothers commonly left school due to marriage or pregnancy. And among the severely food insecure respondents, 41% actually never attended school. So this goes back to noting that, poor education is related to malnutrition, that perhaps the root is related to really the whole process of growing up, not being able to get an education, not having a lot of opportunity going forward. So the main source of income among families for food insecure families was agricultural labor. So being a day laborer on somebody's farm. For food secure families, the primary sources of labor were other day labor, like maybe they did some other type of day labor, like hauling things, or they had small business sales. And it's important to note here that none of the food secure families actually reported that they were that agricultural day labor was their main source of income. In fact, none of them. And so that means that just being an agricultural day labor is putting people into a food insecure situation due to the low pay and the vulnerability of not really knowing if you're going to have a job every day, because the you know, as things change and crops don't produce and there's crop failures, there's no work for people. So around being engaged in agriculture, 93% of the families were engaged in agriculture, meaning that they grew food or they worked on a farm. So this is high engagement. It's a very rural area where growing food is like part of their traditional culture. The food insecure, 48% worked their own lands, plus they did day labor. Whereas the food secure only worked their own land. The food secure families, none of them reported working on other people's lands. They worked their own land. And I mean, none of them only reported being agriculture labeled, meaning none of them had that as their only source of income. They had other sources of income. And the most common crops were corn and beans. And in fact, 100% of those who had land grew corn. This is a very traditional crop that almost everybody grows and eats. It's a primary source of their diet is corn and beans. So when asked about food use during periods of scarcity, there's some interesting things that come out. You can see that when families are experiencing economic hardship, that commonly you reduce meat and poultry, fish and eggs, although there was significant difference in terms of the moderately food insecure and the severely food insecure doing it a lot more than the food secure. But you can see that there's some interesting differences here, although not significant, around the bread and cereals consumption. So the severely food insecure group, like almost half of them said they had to reduce their breads and cereals when they had periods of scarcity. So that's pretty significant because that's a significant source of energy for people. And when you're doing that, you're going to really reduce your caloric intake. And, you know, they don't have a lot of other choices of what to reduce, you know, since they're not eating very much meat already to begin with when you're severely food insecure. And so you're reducing on your source of energy. And then with the bean intake, you can see that it's only severe food insecure families who reported reducing their intake of beans. And that's a primary source of protein for families. So if they're reducing their breads and cereals, which is likely corn intake, and their beans, you know, they're not getting a good portion of what would be traditionally their main source of food. And, you know, already they don't have a very diverse diet, and reducing in that, they're going to really not be having very many calories. So in terms of crises over the last 6 months, everybody experiences crisis in this area. You know, some are able to respond more or less in worse or better forms. But you can see that the yellow highlight there, the agricultural losses was particularly high among those who are moderately food insecure, meaning those that were already in kind of a resource poor situation being pushed further into more severe food insecurity. And altered food use in response to crisis, you can see that eating less preferred foods was very common among the moderately food insecure, meaning they could do that. Whereas the severely food insecure actually had to more commonly reduce food portions, eat less food, and eat fewer meals per day. Around food insecure coping strategies, among the food secure, you know,
I don't know if you're at your about less than 1 minute warning.
Yeah, I'm almost done. Yeah.
Okay.
So, so the food secure families are able to ask other families for help. You know, they are in a situation where they can ask other family for help, whereas those who are severely food insecure and moderately food insecure, not so much. And those who are severely food insecure actually go towards borrowing and using credit for food. So potential food security interventions, there's lots of interest in the hen and egg operations, as well as growing corn that's more adapted to the climate or having higher protein. And then there was also other options there around craft training and such. So in conclusion, there's a high incidence of food insecurity in the area. Food insecure households are larger families. They're older mothers with less education due to economic constraints during childhood. The family income is commonly from agricultural day labor. So food insecurity can largely be seen as a long-term structural phenomenon associated with limited family resources that reproduces itself in subsequent generations. So just a photo there from the area. And so thanks very much. I'm open to any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ginny, for your interesting talk. lots of data you've been able to collect. That's wonderful. So I think while we're waiting for people to put some questions in the chat box, I had a couple questions. First, you mentioned sort of education, but I wasn't familiar with so what is the general education that people are attaining, both from the food secure versus the food insecure families?
So among both groups, the most common years of education is 3 years of education. And so these are mothers who ranged in age from the mid-30s to the late 50s. So, you know, people who are more or less in their childbearing age and a bit older. And they commonly had the 3 years of education. But when I ask about their children's education, it's more commonly getting to about 6 years now, especially among the girls. They're getting to about 6 years. Some of the boys are actually graduating, and you know, a few do go on to further education. But it's getting a bit better, but not you know, all finishing school yet.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. And Heidi Becker has put in a question. She asks, what is the typical family size? And you mentioned that larger families were insecure. And she asks, what is larger?
The larger group is like 7 to 9 people. And so, you know, some of these things were not significant, but there's a trend existing, you know, since there's only 55 families, you can't get significance with everything. And so those who were larger were more commonly food insecure, and I can provide those data to Heidi. She works with me.
Oh, great. Okay, good. And then I have one last question for you. I wasn't sure what the definition of food secure was, so I was just wondering if you could tell me what that one meant.
Sure. So there is a 6-question questionnaire that's commonly included in the national data collection in Guatemala. So I use the same questions in this study here. And so in order to be considered food insecure, people had to answer yes to a certain number of those questions. And the yes was around being worried about not having enough food, not actually having enough food some days, not eating smaller portions, eating less preferred foods, and not eating meals, skipping some meals, or not having food a whole day. And so those questions, of course, are available if anybody's interested.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for your talk, and I've just been so delighted both with your talk and the previous talk with Brunhel to learn more about different activities that have gone on with the QE program over the last few years, because you know there's all these universities that have QE programming, but you know, interfacing and finding out what exactly is going on and the good work that's happening is helpful, I think. So thank you once again.